Well, I think we just wanted to start with a brief overview. I don't know how many people have a pretty good knowledge of blockchain, cryptocurrencies, not so, pretty good? Okay, so we can take that as a measure and just, I think, Omar, I think if you want to give us sort of an overview of the blockchain itself, and sort of the segregation, and then Darren, if you could come in with the cryptocurrencies and how blockchain is the enabling technology, but crypto is, it's hard to extract the two.
Sure, absolutely. So I think, firstly, I'm glad to see that only about 3 people raised their hand to that question, because if in a room more than 3 people raise their hand, something's probably not right. And I think it begs the question, to understand the blockchain, to first understand how did modern communications evolve, and what is the internet, and what are the flaws of the internet that the blockchain actually fixes. We don't have to get into the technicals of exactly what a blockchain is, but you should understand what the benefits of a blockchain are. And so if you look at what is phone communication, someone recognized, we know who the someone is, that you could modulate analog voice, transmit it on an electronic signal, remodulate it on the other side, and that becomes a telephone. Decades later, you realize that you can take an electronic signal and convert a digital signal to an electronic signal and convert it back to a digital signal. So those are your ones and zeros off of a transistor chip. A modem takes that, converts it into a signal that can go over a phone line effectively, and gets changed on the other side. That becomes the building blocks of what is today the modern internet. So it is a very simple communication device of a computer talking to another computer. Well, when it's just me and Lou talking to each other, we know who we are. I know I'm Omar, this is Lou, our 2 computers are connected, I send him a message, I say hello, he says hello back. He tells me he doesn't like me, I tell him I don't like him, but there's a trust and there's a verification there. The same thing is true on a phone conversation. We're talking to each other and we know who we are. And it becomes more complicated when Lou then decides, I want to send a message to my sister, who then decides she wants to send a message to her cousin, who sends a message to their roommate, and it becomes increasingly more complex. And so a system develops of computers need to recognize who the other computer is, and that's what today is called the Internet Protocol. So when you hear, I need an IP address, that's what it is. And again, we don't have to go into static versus dynamic Internet Protocol, but it's one computer or one device recognizing who the other device is. And the fundamental issue of the Internet is one of trust and verification. And how do you truly know that the person, the counterparty on the other side, once you're 10 removed from them or 20 removed from them, is the person who you think that person is? And how do you know that the message that you send, if I send, I give this example all the time, think about your email. I write Lou an email right now that says the opposite. I say, Lou, I really like this session. And he forwards that email to someone else who's in this room, changes the text of my email to say, I really dislike this session, and sends that email out. As far as the person who received that message now looks at it and says, Omar said he really dislikes this session, when I really said I like it, but I have no way of knowing that my message was altered by Lou and sent to someone else with a completely different message involved. And that's what the blockchain does not permit you to do. So blockchain solves the trust and verification issue of the internet, and that's fundamentally what it does. Now, if you start thinking about applications of that, there's a lot of applications of it, and I think over the years and decades we're going to see a lot of applications show up. And money is an easy first one, and the inventors of the blockchain knew that. In order for people to understand what the blockchain was, money is based around trust. I need to be able to know that I am sending you money and the money is real. When I'm giving you cash, that's easy. Mostly, I'm giving you a $100 bill, you presume it's not counterfeit, it's actually money. Services like PayPal get invented on the internet because they are trustworthy services of making it's a medium of exchange. And so for a medium of exchange, it made sense to start out with crypto, but there's a lot of other applications. So that's basically what the blockchain is. And think of it as something that allows all the people who are transacting on the chain to know who the other people are, and to know that what they're receiving is something that is valid. And if it is not valid, so in the example of my email, if we take the same email and put it on a blockchain, when I send Lou that email and he forwards it but he alters it, I will know that he has altered my email. And that's the fundamental difference.
I'll take another stab at it. It's also one of the reasons called a distributed ledger technology is that you think of it as a notepad. All of you have a notepad in front of you. So each of you have a notepad. You write something down on your note. I give you information to write on your note. Everybody then has to agree that you wrote something down in the note, and it's what I gave you to write on your note. Okay? And that agreement is called a consensus protocol. That consensus protocol ensures that whatever was written on that note is there, everybody agreed it was written, and it's there. Now, what's nice about blockchain, actually, is it enables other technologies to be layered upon top of it. So if you add distributed apps, these are apps that, out in the wild anybody can use, they send information back to the blockchain. It can then be recorded in the blockchain in such a way that there's a consensus that ensures that whatever was put on the blockchain is secure and everybody agreed that it was put there. That becomes important for certain technologies like gambling, for example, where you want to make sure that an operator is putting correct information, putting the RNG information, for example, of a game, the random number generator of a game, and recording it beforehand to ensure that nobody cheated in that game, that there are maybe technologies built into the apps that can prove that randomness actually happened in the app, a variety of other tools. Cryptocurrencies evolved as kind of an additional layer technology on top of blockchain, because people realized they could create a currency, if you will, a medium of exchange, a way for people to ensure that there was a component within the blockchain that incentivized certain people to mine it or increase the amount of blockchain, because there was a problem they had to solve, a payment they had to create, and that would expand it. And if there was demand, there'd be enough money available to allow this to happen, because when you expand the blockchain, you have to generate electricity to do so. And so there's a cost. If there's not enough value in expanding the blockchain, then people won't expand the blockchain and it'll decrease. So demand goes up and it's self-correcting, if you will. So that's the core of the blockchain. Now, one of the things we do is we use the technology, that ledger, to record information on it. And we do it in a way that's sort of different. One of the problems with the blockchain is that consensus that we just talked about. If thousands of people around the world are trying to reach consensus on something, it takes time. It takes resources in the internet. And that's one of the big challenges of the existing blockchain. How do you run games on the blockchain? Several solutions have developed in this space where people sort of cheated a little bit. They create an app that generates a lot of results, and they don't record them all on the blockchain. We call these state channels. And then we've developed a solution that kind of takes everything off blockchain on our own private blockchains, and then we record everything game by game, transaction by transaction on our blockchains. And then we have a system for verifying all of that back to the public blockchain. So there are different ways to approach it. Ours is sort of unique in this respect. We use the core technology of the blockchain to do it.
Great. Thanks. Lou, I think we want to sort of just get into the aspects of, cryptocurrencies within gaming and being a regulator in New Jersey. Do you want to just sort of comment on where you think they're going to be? Are they going to be adopted in the gaming industry? And sort of what are the, some of the regulatory maybe hurdles that are going to stopping that from happening?
Regulatory hurdles are, and I think these guys both touched on it, they've used terms like secure and verified. The big issue with crypto is people want to have anonymity. And when you're talking about payments and payment sources with online gaming, and especially with sports wagering, from a regulatory standpoint, with online gaming, there are no payments. We know we can look at everything. We know who every payment is coming from. We know every transaction. We can track every transaction. We know where everything is going. We see the flow both ways. That way, if there's any dispute, if there's a dispute about a game, we can track it. So when you start talking about crypto and anonymity, it's the anonymity that right now is doing it in. And anything we do with regard to payments from a regulatory standpoint, We're going to be guided by FinCEN, AML, and our Department of Banking and Insurance. And right now, you call either one of them and you start talking about crypto, the line goes dead. So,
And I can verify that. We probably had this discussion with 30 regulatory bodies around the U.S., and the response is exactly that. Crypto is, and there's a lack of understanding, but it's for sure going to take, I mean, we can think of probably a half a dozen great applications for the blockchain in gaming, including knowing your customer, responsible gaming, keeping transactional data the way you said. There's so many great applications for the blockchain that starting a crypto discussion with a regulatory body is basically dead on arrival as far as we see
I think,
right now.
I think the regulatory body is the big hurdle. The implementations that have, the crypto market is maybe 2-3 years old, really, and the implementations that have existed before we started this process have really not addressed the issues that you've raised. The blockchain itself, and this is something that we didn't mention in our discussion, but there are security issues associated with the blockchain itself. The public blockchain is really not secure. It's evidenced by the fact that there's been numerous hackings of wallets. That sort of problem has sort of dwindled over the last maybe year or two. Funny enough, we shared a common thing in that I was a regulator for 3.5 years with the Alternate Gambling Control Commission. So when we took a look at gambling a year and a half ago and said, how do we build a platform that's regulatory compliant, that meets all the needs of a regulator, both financial and gambling regulation, we had to solve that problem because the current implementations weren't solving that problem. That's part of the reasons why we developed a system of private blockchains linked to the public blockchain. When I say linked, it's only linked by a SHA-256 hash, by a cryptographic hash. And that's designed to ensure that our blockchains are not changeable, okay? And then in addition, we have an audit chain, which contains every single transaction by transaction on our chain. We have a execution chain, which hides our smart contracts. Smart contracts are programs that are written for the blockchain, for Ethereum blockchains. And in addition to that, we have a performance chain, which publicly displays every one of our transactions as it happens in real time. So we said, okay, what does a regulator need? He needs exactly the things you need. He wants to see every single transaction that happens. With state channels that were implemented before we came along, they were grouping transactions. It wasn't recording every single transaction because they couldn't pay gas, they couldn't pay these costs. We solved that issue. As for anonymity, we've mapped the genome. I can assure you the genome is not anywhere near as complex as mapping the public blockchains that exist right now. It's really not as anonymous as people think. Moreover, the payments ultimately have to end up back at a bank if people want to cash out. So there's going to be AML and compliance at the end points, beginning point and end point for people who come into the system. So I think regulators can get comfortable with that. The biggest challenge is regulators just getting comfortable with crypto, I think. And it's new and it'll take time to evolve. But if you can run a game, and people often ask me this question, like, do customers really care? Does a customer really care if the game is fair and you can prove it? And the answer is, when I first did Amazon back in 2000, when I was living in Tokyo, and everybody said, well, Amazon's not going to work because, you have to pay for packages to be shipped and this, but it's more convenient, but it's never going to work. Well, the reality is, if a consumer has a choice between a game that is absolutely fair and can be proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that the randomness is fair, that every element in the transaction can't be changed, I can assure you that consumer is always going to take that over a game that runs on servers that can be ultimately manipulated either by rogue employees or by the company.
Taryn, I think it might be worth explaining or discussing a little bit, because you used 3 key terms: open blockchains, closed blockchains, and hash algorithms. I think it might be worth explaining a little bit what that means, because that's especially from a regulatory standpoint, those are critical.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's beyond the scope. Beyond the scope of
No, I don't want to go into a lot of
technology is beyond the scope of this conversation.
Not from a technological standpoint, but from a conceptual standpoint.
But generally speaking, you have public blockchain.
Public, that's right.
Public. I think you're talking about public blockchains. So public blockchains are things like Ethereum, Bitcoin. I think everybody's heard of those terms. They exist on the public. They're cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin especially was designed to be just a medium of exchange. And there's this common belief that it's anonymous. actually, I read an article that the NSA has completely mapped the entire blockchain. And it's not that hard, because literally it's public. You can go on the internet and you can actually see every single address that has been created and what is in those wallets. You don't know who owns those wallets, but every single wallet is transparent and available to see. You can see how much Bitcoin was transacted. In fact, you can see the entire history of everything that occurred in that wallet. So you can, in fact, trace every wallet. Now, what you can't trace is what happens if a wallet ends up in a general wallet. So what is a general wallet? A general wallet occurs on an exchange. What's sort of interesting about Bitcoin is it was designed to be decentralized, and it was designed to ensure transactions. But the reality is you had to use centralized systems to get the money out. So big exchanges like Coinbase, you may have heard of it, they have general wallets. And so you send your money to a general wallet. In theory, you could create a new wallet, but you'd be KYC'd by Coinbase. And then the money would go to that wallet, and you essentially break the chain, right? You couldn't trace it anymore. You wouldn't be able to say this guy put it in and this guy took it out. But the KYC process still exists. So I don't see the challenges. I think, I made a joke with Alexander last night. Did your daughter ever use your credit card? I mean, somebody else can use my credit card with my permission. It happens all the time. It doesn't mean that there's not an AML issue. I think the AML issues are deal-withable. Elmer mentioned that there are apps that can be developed for it. For example, for our registration process, we use Face ID. So they have to show a copy of their passport, and then they go online and a picture shows them, and it has to match. The computer actually matches whether the 17 points on their face match the passport photo. And then they give us their Ethereum wallet address. That's a higher standard that exists at racetracks in New Jersey.
Don't go there. That's a whole nother.
I've cashed trifecta tickets at the Meadowlands, so I know.
And I think one of the problems is, and there's a couple of my New Jersey counterparts here, is a lot of things are in baby steps, and people have to be patient. And when you talk about blockchain, people immediately either confuse it or immediately want to jump right to crypto. So, and as Omar pointed out, as a regulator, we have to have people like Darren come to us with applications for blockchain technology in the gaming industry. Like, there's definite possibilities for blockchain with self-exclusion. And verifying self-exclusion lists, and I can see probably in the very near future expanding blockchain technology in the self-exclusion area, and it having an application, especially with online expanding in Pennsylvania and in other states around New Jersey, and that being very beneficial to us. And I think that would open the door for me as a regulator and other regulators now having a better appreciation for blockchain technology, and then you start having other applications in the blockchain, on the blockchain, and then once you start having that, we get more comfortable with it, and then you can start expanding that, and then you can start having the conversation about potentially crypto.
Yeah, I think that's the approach. That's is how. So let me ask a question in that vein. Anyone in the room? There must be some from IGT, Sci Games, Aristocrat, Konami, slot companies. Anyone? No one in the slot business is interested in blockchains then? Wow, zero. And apparently not.
Anybody who represents one of those companies.
Yeah.
Come on, Chris.
Yeah, no, we know there's a few attorneys in the room. No, the reason I asked that is, so for then, this is not as applicable to you, but in the U.S., the shipment of slot machines varies by jurisdiction. And every jurisdiction has its own regulations on how you ship a device. And some say it has to be packaged together, some say it has to be separate, so the software has to come later. Now, if you're a manufacturer that sells in 400 jurisdictions, you need to manage a department of 50 people in-house that are dealing with that issue. And well, that is an ideal application for a blockchain that is being deployed by companies around the world now. Smart contracts are being built by shipping companies, by trucking companies. There is no reason why the U.S. gaming industry, working with the big systems providers, the slot providers, and working with regulators, that's a relatively benign way of bringing real efficiency using the blockchain in the industry for suppliers and for regulators and get used to, hey,
Exactly.
I see what a blockchain is. Now I'm used to the blockchain. All of my state's shipping is
Sure.
done on the blockchain.
Omar,
fact-
thank you very much.
In fact, the
because-
AGA is doing a study now and a survey of how every state regulatory agency deals with the shipping of
Yeah,
slot
games,
machines.
yeah. You raised two really good points, actually. One is, we have two core technologies. One is something we call the goalie algorithm, which we had to borrow from Palo Alto Research Center. It was developed by Edmund Philip Goalie, and it uses as its inputs industry standard RNGs. And as a regulator, that's important. And then it uses cryptography and mathematics to mix them up and produce a new random result. So as for you, all I have to do is come to you and say, look, we use the same RNG that PokerStars uses for its applications. All I got to then do is prove to you that the cryptography and the math actually regenerates a new RNG. So that's one core technology. The second core technology is something we call LEAP, which is these private blockchains which are linked to the public blockchain. That is a secure platform. As a gaming regulator managing gaming platforms, you don't want something that sits on a live blockchain.
Exactly.
And you know what? Not just you, but companies don't want
Right.
that. Is Betfair going to risk its reputation over running an application on a live blockchain? I don't think so. And with smart contract exposed to hackers, no way. It's just not. It's not a practical application of the thing. So, and the other concept that you really hit on indirectly was talking about video slots on the flight in. And this goes to this question of whether or not blockchain gambling is going to become something meaningful in the next 10 years. On the flight in, I was talking to the director of strategy of a major gaming company, and we happened to sit next to each other, and he says, how are you going to get content? And it's a really good question, because, in slots represent something like 50% of the turnover in casino. And the big companies like IGT and others control a lot of the name-branded slots. So that means you have to get them on board. But they're not going to get on board until they see an evolution of something that can actually become something. Really, to skin a slot machine isn't a difficult process. You just have to make the back end. All of that then has to get recorded. Our RNG can handle the RNG inputs for a slot machine, but that's not enough. There's mathematics that have to also be recorded on the blockchain. So that process will take time. I think that blockchain gaming will develop in markets where blockchain is already accepted and used, and that's Eastern Europe and the Far East. And then eventually it will evolve to the U.S. and to other jurisdictions where it can. But online gambling in the United States isn't a big deal right now. Sports betting is, but online gambling isn't. So it doesn't really matter that the U.S. hasn't opened up, really, at the regulatory situation here. The online gambling business outside the United States is massive. Right. It's a huge industry. I think you can live without the U.S. for a while. It'd be nice when it eventually opens up, but crypto is accepted outside. So then this last point comes to the question of whether or not you can run a profitable blockchain gambling business. The daily turnover in crypto is about $120 billion right now. And that's with Ethereum down 80%, Bitcoin down 80%. $120 billion a daily turnover. If you just do 1% of that in one business, it's $1.2 billion a day. And that's not gambling turnover, which is a multiplier effect. So yeah, you can run a profitable blockchain casino in crypto today, I believe. I think that, ex-US. And do it properly. Proper KYC, proper age verification, proper self-exclusion. All these things, these technologies can be built into the system.
So now that I know there's no slot system providers in here, I can badmouth them. No, I'm just kidding. We work with all of them. Here's part of the issue, and I actually am more optimistic maybe than you are, even though we're not in the blockchain business.
Ooh, I'm very optimistic.
Okay, because we're talking about the U.S. and
the U.S.
From
I'm
the
less
US
optimistic about the U.S.
And not from a crypto side, but from the perspective of actually running an entire gaming system. And our experience has been, if you walk into this casino, there might be 2,000 slot machines. Well, those 2,000 slot machines are running on a single casino management system. And that's how the business is built, right? So you have hardware from 10 different manufacturers, that's the game content, and then you have a single system, not so different from online. You have a Betfair platform, you have content from 50 different providers. And well, a lot of these casino management systems were never really built to be what they are. And they have evolved over decades in old programming languages, and they are extremely archaic. And so they were built as slot accounting systems, and then slot accounting systems that evolved into, hey, we could tack loyalty onto this. Oh, let me put a video screen onto it, and let me try and do KYC on it. Let me try and add a table game system to it. But they were slot accounting systems, and they're not really designed. If I was truly fundamentally designing a brand new casino management system for a brick and mortar casino, I would say the right way to do it is actually on a blockchain. And
Yeah.
so that's why I say maybe I'm more optimistic. So.
Oh, yeah, chips could be blockchain. I mean, quite
Yeah,
nice.
there's no
Casino
reason why. I mean,
chips.
from a regulatory standpoint, right? Today, again, I walk into this casino and the random number generator is not truly random, right? There's much better algorithms out there to do random numbers. And I walk into a slot machine, I put in that $100 bill, the bill validator validates that money, and it gets recorded in a system that is sitting in a server that is somewhere sitting in this building, which the regulator has access to. But that is not a very secure way of doing business. It's also not a very immediate or a very futuristic way of doing business. When the regulator wants to do an audit, you have to come to the property, you have to ask for an audit, you're going to download reports from it. The blockchain can take all of that away. And the blockchain could have real-time audits where you could look at every slot machine and every spin of the reel and every RNG and every time $100 comes into the machine. And so it really does propel us into the future. The question is, who's going to do the work? What is the incentive?
Entrepreneurs like me.
That's the only one. Unfortunately, that's the case.
That's what it's gonna be.
Well,
exactly right.
So how do things like the Malta rules and the sort of this, this sandbox, like explore and learn and play, how are those going to do for propelling or hindering any acceptance?
First of all, the last 2 years saw a number of initial coin offerings that were really developed by technology people. They didn't have industry experience. They were just going for the fast money. Really, I hate to say it. Some of them may have been well-meaning. Some of them may have been less well-meaning, but some of them were well-meaning. They wanted to be on the cutting edge. They're 20-somethings. They thought they could create something new and do something, but they didn't really have an understanding of the ecosystems that were already in place. To look at online gambling and try to create an online gambling platform and not use the industry knowledge that has been around for 30 years is nonsense. It's just nonsense. A 20-something that doesn't have advice of understanding the system and how player behavior works, it just doesn't make sense. So I think these sort of initiatives are going to be good. They're going to be important. They're going to add to the mix, and they're going to bring more people in. But the evolution now is that people like me have come into the industry that are trying to do it right and do business-to-business solutions that actually make sense and that can actually work and use all the benefits of the blockchain. And that's what's going to happen. Our core Leap technology isn't just going to be for gaming. Things like infrastructure that you mentioned, it's perfect for it.
Oh, I'll share with you guys. I was at a session a few weeks back in San Francisco. It was being led by PayPal. The other companies that were there, Uber was there, Airbnb was there, Ticketmaster was there, and the number one topic of discussion was how do you take a person's digital ID, a verified person's digital ID, from the digital world to the physical world, and how do you move them within different digital assets, right? So if you think about the ecosystems that these companies run and how a person moves from one place to the next, now if you apply that to this place, I go to the nightclub, well, I need to be verified. I go to play a slot machine, I need to be verified. Now I suddenly switch to my digital asset and I want to start playing, I need to be verified. And there's no reason why there isn't an application which is not necessarily money involved, but there's a digital ID that's following me around that is running on a blockchain between digital and physical worlds.
And we see that all the time, especially now with online companies merging into sports wagering, fantasy companies getting into sports wagering, and they want that seamless wallet.
Yeah.
And they want it seamless for their customers. And I see that potential there.
Yeah, one of the other drawbacks for gambling, and it's not just going to be gambling, other industries are going to suffer from it, was this ICO. For those of you not familiar, an ICO is an initial coin offering where somebody launches a coin and they use the proceeds to fund a project. Unfortunately, the design of these tokens often didn't have any real value system for them. The theory was that you would use it on the platform, and the platform would gain acceptance, and then the token would go up in value. That's not really an economic model, if you really think about it. It's not. An economic model designs something that is stable. In the gambling industry, I don't want to mention their name, but there was a poker ICO a few months back. And well-meaning, it had proper backing, it had a professional poker player. Anytime an ICO has a professional poker player, ought to be worried.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah. But the concept was, they're going to build a decentralized poker app, and they use an algorithm similar to ours. It's a less effective algorithm, but it still was called mental poker, which you have to use for poker. It's a cryptographic algorithm for generating random results. All of that's great, but here's where it failed. It fails because it has a token that nobody can define the value of. Now think about that. If you're a gambler and you're holding $100,000 of token value in your wallet and you gamble, and suddenly the token drops 30%, you just got wiped out of 30%. Your whole edge just got destroyed. What's the value in that? So another area that gambling ICOs have failed is they haven't looked at how to stabilize the value of the token. Because they want to sell, crazy valuations on tokens. It wasn't about building a product, it was about building some token model that they could use to raise money. So one of the things we've worked on is how to stabilize the token so people could actually get their money in and get their money off the platform.
So that's one of the, I guess, one of the problems with the digital casino and using cryptocurrencies for gambling is that you're gambling both.
Yeah.
You're gambling both. You're gambling the value of your coin versus while you're also gambling with the coin. Are there benefits to the digital casinos and coins and how those are coming? I mean, I think we're looking more outside of the U.S. and as we get into, more into the online gaming areas. The benefits for the consumer.
Yeah, I've been
money laundering.
I was a regulator for an offshore. He was for New Jersey. You get to see the whitest of white. I got to see the dirtiest of dirty. Mm-hmm. And gaming companies given the opportunity, all regulators have a challenge, and that is that they have a limited number of people to police their licensees. As a state regulator, you have a huge advantage over something like an offshore regulator because it's not really your business. You're paid by the state, and the incentive is there to really make sure that the licensees are under control, and you're given the resources that you need for the amount of licensees that you have.
And we're going to be driven by consumer protection.
Yeah, I think all regulators are driven that way too, but even the offshore ones are driven that way. I'm not going to badmouth them. But the truth of the matter is they have limited resources for the number of licensees that they have. And that runs into challenges in terms of from a regulatory standpoint. What's great about the blockchain actually is when it's done correctly, it can take a big burden. It doesn't change regulatory situations, but it can take a big burden off regulators because games can be designed so that everything is provably random. So once you've tested it, you can be very confident that you can easily retest it to make sure that it's random and they haven't changed the randomness. So currently in offshore regulation, for everybody's benefit, when a licensee gets licensed, I'm sure it's the same in New Jersey, they have to go through a testing procedure to make sure their RNGs are tested, the gaming equipment is fair, yada, yada, yada. I don't know how much retesting you do, but the reality is, on offline, sometimes people test their equipment and then they change their equipment.
Any change to the system in New Jersey has to go back through our lab.
Yeah, but you don't know if you're dealing with reputable companies. You're dealing with reputable companies. So that you don't have that risk.
And therein lies the difference between New Jersey and offshore.
Yeah, offshore. And it's not that they're not, but one of the core principles of regulation for the offshore is to do probity checks. The idea behind probity checks is that you're dealing with an honest person, but nobody can be 100% sure.
You almost said that with a straight face.
Yeah. No, we did a great job of it at Albany when I was there, at least. But probity is the core element, right? If your probity is wrong, they could still change it, and you don't know. That's the problem. A rogue employee could change the random result, and there's not an incentive for him to do it, but a rogue employee could change the random result in one of your licensees, and you wouldn't know. And that's the problem. With blockchain, you can ensure that doesn't happen. And so from a regulatory standpoint, blockchain actually gives benefits to regulators, tremendous benefits. And that's why it's just a matter of time. It's not a matter of if.
It's education and time.
Education and time.
If you had to say how long.
Amazon took 10, 15 years. Maybe it takes 5, well, it's not going to be 5, maybe 10, 15 years. But I think there'll be a very good business offshore for a while before it gets accepted industry-wide.
Omer, how long do you think? it's
You know,
gonna take?
I mean, time is always, so we can all take a swag, right? I don't know how many of you have read the McKinsey report from the 1990s that said that there's going to be like 4 million cell phones in the world by 2005, right? I mean, I think
That was way off.
Yeah, I mean, I think the number is now 8 billion cell phones, or
The internet moves
whatever the
fast,
number
and so
is.
it's hard to do it.
You know, people ask us all the time the question of, all right, 95% of all play in the U.S. In casinos today is done in cash. 10 years from now, I don't know if that number is 50% or 40% or 60%. All I know is that it's less. You know, so the blockchain, our thinking on the blockchain is it behooves us in the U.S. as the U.S. gaming industry to study and understand the blockchain the same way they're doing in financial services, the same way they're doing in the legal world, to think about how we can put contracts on these, the same way I mentioned the shipping industry, the trucking industry, the car industry. It is what we should be doing to understand, for regulators to understand, what is this new technology? How does it apply? Where are the pitfalls? Maybe, like I said, maybe KYC is a great place to start. Maybe responsible gaming and self-exclusion is a great place to start. But we as an industry are late adopters, and we shouldn't be. And the way to do that is to try and at least start studying it, and then let entrepreneurs like yourself educate us to say, hey, this is what you guys are missing out on. This is why it's actually better. So, you know, I think we will see change, but we will need to see change from the entrepreneurial side.
Lou, how long do you think? You're the pessimist.
It's going to
so-
take somebody like Darren
Okay.
to come in and bring the
Convince-
product.
It's all on your product.
And convince-
It's all in your- I mean,
Or somebody
he makes
else.
it sound so simple, but nobody has submitted a product to
No,
us.
that's exactly right.
To integrate blockchain technology.
And
And
it's
we're
a
5 years in New Jersey,
Yeah.
we're 5 years into online gaming, and nobody's
Yeah,
integrating.
because there was too much incentive for people just to launch coins and make money and not do it. It isn't just gambling, right? If you look across the spectrum of ICOs, it was all done by people with very little experience in the industry they were promoting. You had 20-year-olds trying to do banking. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, you have to understand the banking industry. I mean, you have to, there's financial. The idea that you're going to release gambling apps into the wild, and by the way, that's possible, and it will probably happen. You know, it's irresponsible from a moral standpoint. You know, you won't have self-exclusion, you won't have underage gambling, you'll have 10-year-olds gambling. I mean, that's just, you know, governments will attack those apps, and it'll be like, you know, not Napster, but, well, Napster is a good example, would be like Pirate Bay all over again. These things will happen. There'll be things that bring bad taste to the mouths of people, but just like in sports betting, there'll be people who'd still do illegal sports betting even when you have legal sports betting.
It's not just going to go away.
So none of these problems will be completely solved, but the blockchain definitely creates opportunities that just aren't there without it.
So I'm interested in, to ask this question, I'm always interested in a blockchain panel session. Who attends a blockchain panel session or a crypto panel session? Well, I know these people do, and my curiosity is, you know, are there operators, are there suppliers, right? Why spend an hour of your time thinking about blockchain and crypto, you know, and how you think that's going to change what it is that you do? And obviously, I'm not asking for everyone to raise their hands and tell us what they do, but it is something that it is continuously I'm curious about, right? When you're looking at product or technology we're all saying it's going to happen. When it's going to happen, we don't know. How it's going to happen, we don't know. But it is something that I'm curious about. And so anyone who wants to tell me later, I'd like to know.
Or maybe,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that we want to do a poll, but.
Yeah, no polls.
No open polling. But I do think we want to open the floor to any questions, if anybody has anything for the panel. There's one. We have microphones around if you want to use that.
I'm Hans Baspel from the Danish Gambling Authority. I'm here because it said implications for regulation in the subtitle, so that's the answer to your question. But my question is, you mentioned that there's some math in a slot machine which is not the RNG. Do you see the blockchain as a way of recording how the machine went from the input from the
Absolutely.
RNG to the output towards the player, whether in symbols or in winnings?
absolutely, that's actually the challenge, right? So we could get IGT to let us skin their game, and they could give us the skin of the game, but the math behind the game, which is another critical element, right? There's so for a slot, for those of you who don't understand, a slot machine has a pay table, and that pay table is determined just by certain mathematics. So it isn't just, you know, an RNG that determines the spin, which it does, but the pay table, the math has an important part in determining the random outcome in the entire game. So one of the challenges will be getting licensed people who own popular games that millions of people use around the world to adopt the blockchain. But absolutely, all that math has to go on the blockchain and be secured. Otherwise, how can you guarantee that the game is fair? You know, and by the way, having been in the offshore market, I can tell you that popular games are illegally skinned. You know, it's a big surprise to everybody. They're illegally skinned, and they run on servers in Eastern Europe, and people play them thinking that the pay tables are the same as the pay tables in the real game that they're playing. But in reality, the pay tables are designed so that the player is losing, you know, the return to player is around 20%. It's a huge gouge. Huge. I actually met an operator like this once that was using skin games, illegal skin games. I couldn't believe it when he telling me the story. So it's a real problem, and yes, that was once companies like IGT and others accept blockchain and they start making products for people like us, then there'll be an opportunity to record that information, and that'll take a huge burden off the regulator. Oh. Great.
Hi. So I work for a European state-owned lottery and sports betting operator, and I attended the ICE conference in February, and I think I recognize you from that conference.
Yeah, I was on that
Yeah,
one.
exactly. And I was on the show floor there, and I met one of the operators, a seller of, let's call it a white label lottery solution based upon blockchain and cryptocurrency. And that was typically something that would be in the non-regulated market. So the way I see this is if the regulated industry don't see this and come up with solutions, you know, the non-regulated market will do this. So this is something, and I understand the whole cryptocurrency discussion and the concerns, and they are real, but the threat is also real that the non-regulated market will move upon this and then sort of create a bigger problem for us.
I'm just going to say one thing about that, you're absolutely right. The fact that we didn't have sports wagering in this country meant that the gap was filled by an unregulated sports bookies from all over the world.
Yeah.
And now we're trying to change that, and quite honestly, it's going to be an uphill battle, because how do you get a patron to switch? And that's exactly what's going to happen in the blockchain world. So
It's already happening.
Yeah.
It's already happening.
And to that point, we're trying to put the genie back in the bottle in New Jersey. Before we won the case, we were tracking 108 offshore sports wagering sites that were taking bets in the state of New Jersey.
Wow.
So that's who our legal sports wagering sites are competing with in our state.
Any other questions?
See, I couldn't go 45 minutes without talking about sports wagering.
Almost made it, though.
Almost made it.
As I told you, we can put it on the blockchain, don't worry.
We have 2 minutes left, so let's just go down the line with sort of any last thoughts. One more question. There you go.
Hi. Quick question about accepting cryptocurrencies on these gambling sites. Like, what are your fears there? Because there is a level of anonymity there.
That's my fear as a regulator.
I mean, the anonymity is not the problem, right? You KYC people. The way online gambling works now, in outside of the United States, I'm not sure how New Jersey does it, but because it may vary. But I think in Jersey you mentioned that you had to we talked before. You had to KYC before they bet, right?
Before
there's limited
when they register for the site.
Yeah, there's usually, and that's necessary because you have to make sure they're from out of state. They're not from out of state, right? But on the offshore world, you know, like the UK, there's limited KYC on the way in. There's limited.
You just have to be in the state when you place your wager.
Oh, you only have to be in the state. Oh, so it doesn't. Okay, so that matters. Anyway, yeah, in the UK, there's limited KYC. You can sign up with a credit card and you can get in your website very quickly. The KYC becomes a problem when you take money off the platform. So the KYC problem can be solved a lot easier. Face ID, passport checks on the way in. The same way that crypto exchanges already do it now. So KYC is not the big problem that people think it is. It's sort of a myth. And really, anonymity for most coins isn't so anonymous. As I said, all of the ledgers are public. There are cryptocurrencies like Monero that are designed to be specifically anonymous, and they cannot be easily tracked. And so they exist, and eCash, they exist and they're a problem, but I don't think any reputable platform takes them so it's irrelevant.
But yeah, I mean, you can know the source of funds by looking at the chain and where the money came from. So you can see if it came from a Monero account. You may choose to not take that. And I think there's controls that could be put into place on the currencies and on the wallets and like acceptance. And it's, again, I think we go back to that. It's time, it's education of our regulators
I mean,
and
look,
showing them that we can get past some of these
In the
pieces.
UK, the average bet's around 20 pounds. What is it in New Jersey? It's probably $20, $30 the average bet. It's small, right? You don't really have a real money laundering problem for 80 or 90% of the action. No, there's no money launderer who's going to take advantage of a $20 average bet. The problem is on the big accounts. That's where you might have the issues. So, and I think when sports betting becomes more mature, that'll be a bigger problem for New Jersey is AML, because you'll have bigger bettors. We've talked about this in our conversation before. So I don't think AML is a huge problem in online gambling, whether it's crypto or not. I think, there are much better places to do money laundering than in crypto casinos. And crypto itself, as big as it is, I don't think it's a great opportunity because of the volatility of the currencies. They don't present a lot of opportunity for money laundering, and even the stable ones like Tether only have about a $3 billion market cap. So there are better places from Danske Bank in German banks that are being accused of money laundering are bigger threats, I think, than crypto is right now.
Okay. Any other questions? Because I think we are out of time. There's going to be a lunch break till about 1:30, I heard, so then we'll come back into session then. Thank you, everyone, for joining.